Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Phil von Stade, and Gary asked me to come and do this presentation, which I did at Berkeley recently. We just kicked off the Berkeley Quantified Self-Group. And I just wanted to say that back in 2006, my wife and I sold our company, sold the house, sold the children, bought a boat. And been cruising for a number of years, so I'm a little bit rusty at the presentation here, so bear with me a little bit here. Quantified self is, of course, very much about measuring various aspects of our health and our bodies, and there's going to be some great presentations tonight, of course, and in general at Quantified Self. My own personal interest, though, is the mind, and specifically memory, and the various aspects. I have a number of interests in dementia issues as well, but let's go back into personal memory. And specifically what I do to try to remember stuff, because I don't have a particularly great memory, is take a lot of notes, and I use a spreadsheet. And why a spreadsheet? Because basically, I'm a techie, I'm a geek. I started off on VisiCalc 30 years ago, went to Lotus, then to Excel, built my company around that. And for any of you who happen to remember Metaphor, anybody remember Metaphor in the audience? All right, fabulous company. This is Chile, 1991. I have been doing stuff with spreadsheets for a long time, so I'm very comfortable with them. And I think a lot of people here probably do use spreadsheets at various levels. A spreadsheet is a great way to track your diary, to track information, because there's a number of things you can do, of course. You've got rows for time, and you can see I've got thousands of rows here representing each day. You've got categories. You can use colors to show the lesser categories, and there's a lot of other highlighting you can do. And you can put a tremendous amount of text into any particular row. So that could be your diary, or in my case, it's also my calendar. So I use this for planning future and back. You can also then, and we're going to come back to that in a minute, you can also then have a spreadsheet for each particular category or group. And then, of course, you can have several different books, one for finance, for example, another one for health and medical. I can't emphasize this enough. I don't know if everybody here is religious about this, but I back up to Time Machine, I back up to another little device, and you send it to a friend or family at least once a month or so, keep it there, and yes, you can keep your important stuff in the cloud. But you can never have too many copies. Lots of copies keeps stuff safe. It's an old expression that I really like to emphasize to everybody. Because if you're going to take this information, I have one friend who did it in a book and lost their book, unfortunately. He can maybe tell you about that later. Calendar planning, it's daily. Yes, this is a bit of a problem. It has to be done every daily, but smile first thing in the morning, just get it over with. If you're tracking yourself every day, there's going to be sometimes when you miss a few days, and I'll go back to my photographs because I tend to take photographs of everything. And I can go back and then kind of catch up to where I've been. But let's go down here. We've got rows for time. Location. This is going to be very important, as you'll see in a little bit. I can actually track then various members of my family, my kids, for example, my wife. I track whether or not I've had visitors or going to have visitors. I track business things, and then weather, and then comments. And this tends to be searchable text and very, very long. For example, when did I first meet with Gary Wolf? Okay, and I could go back into this and immediately find out all the meetings I had with Gary Wolf. I might also want to go back on a location basis and say, where was that cool hotel that Raj and I met at and had drinks at? So where did I meet Raj? Again, I could just do a quick search in here. You can't really do this, of course, with paper. So by putting everything in this database, if you will, it's just a simple Excel spreadsheet, I can now search and then break things out on a regular basis so I can then break out all my books, movies, theater, restaurants, health, and other concepts. And we'll get into these individually here in a second. So, for example, with books, I will track the name of the book, the author, the date it was written, my ranking of it, and then a little book review. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I find a few weeks after I've read a book, I scratch my head and said, God, it was a good book. What was it about? You know. But at least if I force myself to do this, I'll get some information from it. And likewise, I can do this with movies I watch. We don't watch a ton of movies, but we kind of keep track of those. And then I can remember, oh, I don't see that one again. And theater, of course, as well. So I can break down each of these basic categories. I also break down restaurants. If that was a particularly good restaurant, I'll try to make a note of it so that when somebody says, hey, if you're going to be in Durban, South Africa, what's a good restaurant to go to? And I can go, oh yeah, what was it? I can go down here and immediately find that. And also avoid some of the bad ones. One of the more interesting areas actually is doing concepts in a spreadsheet. Because it's a matrix, you can move things around, you can color things, and you can say, well, these are some technology things I need to learn. These are networking, this is social, this is finance. These are certain curiosities, this age and memory stuff that I'm working over there. And I can move with this every day or two. And I will go back in, make sure I'm on track on certain of these items, and then move them around, and then use this as just kind of a loose thinking tool. Some people call it a concept map or a mind map. One of the great satisfactions in this is every now and then you feel like, God, what did I accomplish? Did I get anything done in the last month or quarter or whatever? And I find that if you did this kind of tracking, you can actually then break things out and say, okay, what did I get done last month? Well, in the community, we ran a talent show up in our summer community. We were on the board of the YMCA and we did certain really good stuff there. We did some travel, a lot of good travel here. The blue ones are on the sea, by the way. And you can break the accomplishments out by career, of course. Travel, community, boards that you're on, big events, projects, family, weddings, etc. Music if you're writing music, articles, things, etc. There's a lot of great ways you can break this out. And finally, what I'm trying to get to is a timeline. And it's one thing that we talk a lot about is timelines and how important this is. This is our life here, but it's now just the keystones that we're looking at, the milestones rather. We've got time and location. Location is very important, as you'll see in a moment. And these are the key events in our lives. And these are particular people, my daughter's son, my daughter, so I have two sons, my wife, my mother, that I track perhaps, and that allows me then to index my media. All right, yes, I have over 150,000 photos. I've got over 300 gigs of video going back to 1925 in many cases. And I organize that by place, because it's the one thing in most cases you're going to remember is where did that thing happen? And from that, then I can go back and say it happened in Europe, it happened, oh, I can't remember, that's right, Greece, there it is, 2002. I couldn't quite remember what year, but it was this month, it was on the island of Hydra, that's right, and there's my wife sailing in a particular storm that we happened to enjoy that day. But fortunately, most of the memories are more like this, sunsets in the Caribbean. I do miss them, although we got some pretty nice sunsets from Berkeley, especially of San Francisco. And that's spreadsheets.
This is going to be a great Q&A, and I think, Phil, and I'm going to start it off maybe with just a little bit of dialogue with you, because one of the things that I really like about seeing talks like this at QS is that it sort of exposes advanced use cases, and I think that you've kind of shown us, because you're technically confident, you've shown us a kind of life log that's available kind of when you get into the guts of the system, when you enter things directly onto a spreadsheet. And so I do think this kind of data is emerging as data that is collectible, and then we'll eventually have tools that don't require us necessarily to interact column by column in a spreadsheet, but will have the same value. And so I'd just like to encourage, let's ask Phil some questions, but think about, what value is here aside from the sort of task of entry or the facility with spreadsheet using that Phil also obviously has.
I'm flattered he calls this sophisticated. It's just a bloody spreadsheet.
No, but you know what I'm saying.
I don't even have any cute charts and this beautiful graphics and stuff like that.
Right, but I mean, a question.
I did leave the sex part out.
Do you keep track of that also?
Of course.
Right. So
it's real easy in small numbers.
Do you? I think we're developing a theme despite my best efforts tonight. Do you seek analytical correlations, or are you using this very much like people use a diary?
It's not so much the analytical in the usual sense of quantifying numbers, like I'm finding that my mood is going up if I'm traveling or on my boat. It's not so much looking at charts and how that goes as it is going back and trying to find the moments and saying, what were the highlights of my life, of my kids' lives, of my other friends and family, and trying to identify what those were and what's the common thread through those. And I can do that here in a looser way. I would love to get to a point where I could perhaps put some real numbers to some of these, but I leave that to some of the more clever people with some really cool software perhaps. And I don't know what other people are using out there. I'd love to hear if anybody is using some other tools to track as well. So.
Okay, great. So let's open it up. Yeah.
No, just a couple of real practical questions. How much time do you spend every day just entering information? And how often do you actually look up stuff?
How much time do you spend every day entering, and how often do you look things up?
I spend an average of probably 5 to 10 minutes a day entering information and just reviewing. So if you sit down the first thing in the morning and say, okay, what did I do yesterday? Let's see, okay, yesterday was Wednesday, okay. Now I go back to that. That's right, I remember now. And I start filling it in. I get the information. That'll take about 5 to 10 minutes, and sometimes it leads me to think, oh, that's right, I got to plan about this. I got to go to the eye doctor, next week.
That's not very much time.
No, it's about 5 to 10 minutes, but then once every few days, or perhaps every week or two when I'm feeling more inspired, I'll sit down and I'll go back and I'll review a lot of things, especially the categories that I had the concepts. The concepts, I'll review those probably about once every few days. And that takes a little bit more time. And then the tasks and the accomplishments, I'll try to do that once every month or two. And sit down and just go and say, what did I actually get accomplished the last couple of months? Yeah.
How do you determine categories? Have you found any interesting correlations between categories?
How do you determine categories? How do you come up with your categories?
I think there's some fairly obvious categories that one can, of course, have, as I did here, such as books, because I find that books are very influential to me. I spend a lot of time reading. I don't spend a lot of time reading, but when I do spend time reading, I really read in depth, and I like to remember what I'm doing. Movies and things like that. The other categories were like people and just events. So certainly I want to track any important event. It's kind of loose, and it's going to be very personal depending on who you are. A column for mood would be a common one for many people, of course. What is your mood on a day? Or what are you eating? If you track what you're eating. Luckily, I have had the good fortune of having the same spouse for 37 years now, and she feeds me very well, so I don't even have to worry about that.
Let's take a question from the fellow with the mustache all the way in the back there. Yes.
Hi. I'm interested to know what surprised you. What you've gathered all this data. Did anything surprise you?
What surprises have you had?
I hate to put a damper on that question, but the thing is that because I do this on a regular basis, there's no big surprises really. It's kind of more of a flow. I'm pretty used to looking at it and thinking, oh my God, look at all these books I'm reading. Every now and then I go like, oh, I'm reading an awful lot of this kind of memory-related book, for example.
I guess I was asking not whether you were surprised by what you did, but what patterns you saw emerging from the data.
You could say also, what have you learned about yourself, right? That's really,
And again, it's not so much a do this analysis for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years and say, what did I learn about myself? It's really more about just a day-to-day evolution of looking at this and going back and saying, oh my gosh, I used to spend an awful lot of time doing X, Y, Z. Or we used to eat out an awful lot, and now we're not eating out very much. Or we used to see a lot of these friends, but we're no longer seeing those friends as much. So there's no real quantifiable numbers to this so much as there is just a general evolution. I would like to see it go a lot farther, and I'm hoping it will again. I'm hoping there'll be new types of software.
What features would you really like in a system like the one you're using that you don't have? Is there one thing that you'd really like to do that you're not doing? No is an acceptable answer. Let's take some more questions.
Good question.
What determines whether a particular event is commented in the spreadsheet, and do you regret not putting a particular event in there later on?
How do you figure out what event to comment in the spreadsheet?
In the spreadsheet, in that one column, almost everything, it's almost like a little diary. I mean, it might be 100 words, sometimes it's like 20 or 30 words, but it's an awful lot of information. So there's very little that I leave out on a day-to-day basis. I'll even say, if I had a particular good meal, what it was, what restaurant, who we met with, certain phone conversations. There's an awful lot of information. And yes, every now and then I'll go back and I'll say, oh, when did I meet with Gary Wolf? And I can't find Gary Wolf in there because I forgot to put Gary Wolf in.
Okay, two more.
Yeah, Red.
Do you ever put word wrap in your columns?
I have played with word wrap in the columns and it gets real messy there. I don't need to because as soon as you click on it, it brings up the whole paragraph, you know.
Okay, Jerome, right in the middle there.
Who else is seeing the data and how do they use it? Do you share it with your kids or spouse?
I try not to share this with anybody, actually, and I'm a little nervous that some of this is actually doing because I've really vetted those spreadsheets fully. But I certainly do communicate with my family about a lot of this. And as I said, this is actually the tie-in to my media collection. So as far as that goes, when you come up with a timeline, if anybody in my family asks me, you know, when was it that we were in Bermuda? Or when did my mother go to the Danube? I can immediately go back here and find that out and give them the answer and say, this is when it is. Are you looking for pictures? Yes, I am. Here's where those pictures will be. So, yes, I do share that with family and friends in that same kind of context, trying to give perspective to the time.
Phil, amazing project, yeah.